Okay, if anybody is out there or checking the page and is here, I have the fun and an enviable task of sitting here and talking to no one, my screen, alone in my pajamas for Poets in Pajamas here on Sunday night, August 30th. As you can see, I'll do the fashion review. I am wearing hedgehogs. I have hedgehog pajamas for summer and for winter. In winter, I have a hood where I get to look like a little hedgehog. And I think my winter pajamas are cuter. I'm not gonna lie. But it being 85 degrees in my house right now and not cooling down, I stuck with my summer wardrobe. These multicolored hedgehogs came from Target because I like to wear only the finest to bed. My name is Traci Brimhall, and this is my reading for Poets in Pajamas. I'm going to hang out and keep reviewing my pajamas, where I like to get pajamas, things about pajamas, and waiting for folks to join. I will say, if anybody is already here and ready to be here early, that on the comments, I can see that sort of on the side, and if I can't, someone's going to text them to me. But if you have questions at the beginning here as I'm chatting, or questions as I read, I will answer questions at the end. I know people often want to just listen in and focus on the reading while the reading is going on, and don't want to be typing questions maybe at that time. Although maybe with all of the Zoom life that we have had, perhaps you're feeling more comfortable with that and you're like, yeah, I can listen and chat at the same time because in Zoom I'm doing it all the time. So I often only get pajamas as gifts or as hand-me-downs, which is kind of strange, I know. Um, my most recent pajama purchase, oh, was Christmas. I got some fuzzy ones. So in addition to my hedgehog collection, I also have deer pajamas. They're actually fawns because I have the white dots, but I also have little antlers. On the fawns wouldn't have antlers, but it's really cute. Um, Winter pajamas. So I do like a nice PJ. Well, some of my summer ones are not as exciting, um, but that's what we got to do. So we gotta keep it simple, gotta keep it light because it's still hot here in Kansas. Um, so I guess I can talk a little bit about before it's almost exactly time for things to begin. Um, and I can say that tonight it is pajamas, though clearly you can see from the background light flooding into my home that it's still quite sunny here in Kansas. This is not sundown, though I am in my PJs already for this reading. But I'm going to start the reading with a lullaby. So I'll be reading tonight from my newest book, which I'll hold up again. Um, it's called Come the Slumberless to the Land of Nod, which is the most long, annoying title in the world. I know, what are you going to do? But this nice long title for this book refers to Nod, which is in the Bible. It's the place where people might have heard the story, even if you've never picked up a Bible, that Cain, first Adam and Eve, like first two people, right? And they have two boys. So we don't know where the rest of us came from, but Cain and Abel were brothers, and Cain killed Abel. And for that, he was banished from the Garden of Eden, and he wandered through the land of Nod. So I sort of was interested, and I read that, but I also knew this little sing-songy poem growing up about Wynken, Blynken, and Nod. This little poem about these three brothers who were dreaming, and they become the two eyes and the dreaming head nodding along. And I thought that was very interesting that Nod was a land of sleep and dream and lullaby, as well as the land of exile in the Bible. So the nod in the title of Come the Slumberless to the Land of Nod is this idea that how one place could be both the place of exile of murderers, and then also on the other hand, it was this land of lullaby and sleep and dream, like it was in this poem that I learned as a kid. And so I like to say this book is full of murder ballads and lullabies, because the lyric essays within the book are all titled Murder Ballads and are all about my murdered friend. And I was also a new mom and watching the murder trial unfold while I was pregnant. Um, And so there are also lots of lullabies. There's lots of poems about being a new mother. Um, and the book really deals with this tension of love and death, of murder ballad and lullaby, of bringing new life into a world where it was the first time I was like, evil is real. You know, when you're struck with that kind of tragedy, it does feel really intense and visceral, and forgiveness felt very hard um, when I started writing these poems. I'll also say, just giving people a minute to arrive too, that the poems, there's one poem I'll read tonight of my set of only four poems that I'll read. Three I've never read at readings before. It's so hard to get out. And lots of times when you travel to read IRL, people have definitely not heard you read those poems before, but on the interwebs, I don't know if people are coming to multiple readings in these virtual formats that are available to us. So I want to make sure I read some new things so that if anybody is following and has been to more than one reading, that they don't hear the same set of poems. So it's really changing how I dive into the book and what I see to pull out or what I want to think about. And like I said, because this reading series is Poets in Pajamas, I did want to start with a lullaby tonight. So before I get into that, just knowing that some people might arrive a little late, I'll just say again that you're welcome to put in the comment section, which should show up to me, any questions that occur to you, so that at the end of the reading, I'll just read for 15 minutes and then have 15 minutes for Q&A, that I can check on that and respond to anything if anybody posts a question. And again, the Land of Nod, um, as I was saying, was a big place for my imagination to wander, to think about a single location as the site of both exile as well as dream, and why might those two be related? So my first poem for tonight is I did a lot of research on lullabies, and the epigraph for the book comes from Federico Garcia Lorca's really beautiful essay on lullabies and the function of a lullaby, and what it's really there to do. So a couple of times I play on the If That Mockingbird Don't Sing, if That Diamond Ring Don't Shine, and I play off of lullaby titles. So this one is called If That Mockingbird Don't Sing. I'll find you a bird with more admirable passions and a syrinx made for nocturnes. And if its voice can't soothe you, I'll find one of Sandman's disciples in the foxglove. And if she offers to cast you as King Arthur, if only you'll audition in nothing but chamomile and a sword, say yes. It's best to stay on a dream-bringer's good side. If all she offers you is eternal sleep, say no, but pocket the pill. God's only going to rapture 11 souls, and sleep will be hard to find after that. But who needs the ineffable when you have sleep and the easy symbols of its gods? And if dreams don't come to you with loose teeth and shipwrecks and pirates in bikinis, I'll give you a hand on your back and call your name. Take you from the dream against your will, and I will give you the portrait of a nightingale grieving like a gardener in winter. I'll give you a local god and his raucous allegory. I'll diagram the moral calculus of the fable and edit towards safety. Beware the wolf always, but trust the witch and the sugar crash, not the star lore which shadows your cheeks with your lashes. Never, never the halo offered by the angel gowned in snow. So I mentioned becoming a new mother at the time of my friend's murder trial and sort of processing all of that. And this next poem is called Oh Wonder. And initially, all I wanted to do was write a poem about wonder, because I wanted to write something that wasn't sad. And I wanted to write something about my son and what fun it is to be the mother of a small child who's like really interested in the facts of the world. And I love a fact. I think facts are a beautiful form of intimacy with the world, of studying it and knowing it. Like this poem references the fact that cumulus clouds weigh 1 million pounds, and how astonishing that it's up there. The other cloud name is the mammatus, which you might recognize like mammary in there. And if you look up pictures of mammatus clouds, you'll see it's just like droopy boobs in the sky. But it's just all of these fascinating things. And so this poem is full of facts that I just found wonderful. And I brought it to my writing group, and they said, "But look at this line. Look at this line. You just turn away from this tragedy at the center of the poem." And they urged me to go into it and go deeper and say the truest thing, and that would be a wonder also. So I have to give props to my writing group, who keeps me revising towards honesty. Um, and the it of the poem is the wonder of the title. So if that doesn't make sense, there's an anaphora of it is, and it always means wonder. Oh, wonder. It's the garden spider who eats her mistakes at the end of day so she can billow in the lung of night, dangling from an insecure branch or caught on the coral spur of a dove's foot and sleep, her spinnerets trailing radials like ungathered hair. It's the million-pound cumulus. It's the stratosphere, holding it, miraculous. It's a mammatus rolling her weight through dusk, waiting to unhook and shake free the hail. Sometimes it's so ordinary it escapes your notice. Pothos reaching for windows, ease of an avocado slipping its skin. A porcelain boy with lamp-black eyes told me most mammals have the same average number of heartbeats in a lifetime. It is the mouse's engine that hums too hot to last. It is the blue whale's slow electricity. 6 pumps per minute is the way to live centuries. I think it is also the hummingbird I saw in a video, lifted off a cement floor by firefighters and fed sugar water until she was, again, a tempest. It wasn't when my mother lay on the garage floor and my brother lifted her while I tried to shout louder than her sobs, but it was her heart, a washable ink. It was her dark's genius, how it moaned slow enough to outlive her. It is the orca who pushes her dead calf 1,000 miles before she drops it or it falls apart. And it is also when she plays with her pod the day after. It is the night my son tugs at his pajama collar and cries, "The sad is so big, I can't get it all out." And I behold him, astonished, his sadness as clean and abundant as spring, his thunder heart a marvel I refuse to invade with empathy. And outside, clouds groan like gods. A garden spider consumes her home. It's knowing she can weave it tomorrow between citrus leaves and earth. It's her chamberless heart, cleaving the length of her body. It is lifting my son into my lap to witness the birth of his grieving. So it did turn out to be a little bit sadder than the initial plan for the poem, but I think that's always ideal for a poem, right? It's a very old quote, but the one where Robert Frost said, "No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader." And I always think my ideal reader might be my future self who hasn't learned what the poem has to say yet, and sometimes months or years later I go back, I was like, that's what the poem meant. And so I think when something comes out of you when writing that you weren't expecting, that's the thing you should trust. That's the thing you should believe and follow around. Also say two series in this book. So there's a series of Dear Eros poems to love and the drive towards life and desire, of course, and Dear Thanatos. And Thanatos is the death drive, the thing that makes us do self-destructive things or things that aren't good for us, or just maybe even doesn't have to be bad, because that desire towards oblivion can also be, versions of meditation or prayer or something, right? But that sense of nothingness, of not being yourself anymore. So I won't say it's all unhealthy things. But I was writing to Thanatos for a long time. I used to call them my one-night stand poems. So I would just, anytime I was sort of stuck for writing and sort of in between book projects, I wasn't in love, so I was having one-night stands. And I was just having one-night stands with my darkness and writing to Thanatos. And they were often lyrical and weird and short. Thanatos poems that I would come up with were really strange. There's only one that I think kind of makes sense, but I kind of liked that. I tend to be very narrative or tend to want to communicate, but I liked that Thanatos was a little bit perplexing and strange and didn't need to come out from behind the metaphor and explain itself. And it was towards the end. It was one of the last sets of or things that I wrote for the book. I sort of felt like the book might be missing something, and it occurred to me to try writing towards the opposite impulse. Um, I had sort of decided maybe the Thanatos poems, my one night stands, maybe did belong in this book that was strange and dark and weird and about hard, dark stuff. But when I started writing to Eros, when I started writing to love and the impulse to live, the poems tend to be really chatty. My voice really seemed different. And the tone was just very strange, much more like objective and but also urgent at the same time. I don't need to tell you how to feel about the poem, but I'm going to read one of the Dear Eros poems rather than one of the Dear Thanatos poems. And I don't believe I've read this Dear Eros poem aloud before. Dear Eros, I did this to myself, I know. You are not mine, but come as wind clotted with the end of season. Did you know all a ginkgo's leaves fall on the same day? Sometimes it's called maidenhair for its beauty, for how easily it quakes. Of course you know, you expert on falling. Did you know a friend told me that the first thing he learned in a rescue class was how to break the arm of the person he was trying to save? But what if this time the only person I want to save is myself? I would ask what I have to break, but I know. My therapist said I was resilient, that I didn't just survive trauma, but thrived. Did you know the ginkgo excels at healing itself? Surely you, who made yourself in the image of a Madonna with a glacial face and a bloody fist in the chest, knows what it means to make your heart an ocean. Mine is greedy, weak. In my best moments, I might be Lake Erie, flooded for 6 months with useless abundance, dry the rest. But not you, not your stubborn metaphor. Thank you for that combustible muscle, I mean that. It can't be easy to open both sides of a robe and bear that much tenderness for strangers, to accept so much terrible need. I've done it though. You know, I sat naked next to electrical heaters in dusty classrooms, while the circle around me attempted my widening hips and unclenched hands in charcoal. I even kept a sketch to remember myself young, nearly pretty, a perfect subject who didn't mind vulnerability and stillness until the timer chimed. When someone offered to hurt me any way I wanted, I put their hand around my throat, that time choosing it. Where do you keep your secret? I know, the bottom of your vestments where the blue takes over. That purple pulp of you finds spark and oxygen and convinces everyone you've given all you have, but you're holding back. We all do. I can be as impatient as any ginkgo in October, but I can hold my hand over the back burner, low heat, burn colder. Oh, watch me bear it, watch me break, wait for the robe to drop from my shoulder. I found that really interesting, and that's no one said show up to Poets in Pajamas with a prompt. But if I was asked to offer one, it would be that to a poem to an abstraction, to an idea, to a feeling. When I assign odes to odes in class, we do them to body parts, and I say, what's the hardest part of your body to like or to love? And where that tension is often where there's an interesting poem. So I'd say that too, of like, what's the emotion you struggle most with? What's the emotion you hate to experience? And also write to its opposite, and see what those two things have to say to each other. So I'll read my last poem. And I did say in the beginning that one of the things I discovered, being the land of Nod, the place of exile and murder, as well as the land of sleep and dream, one of the things I found the book ended up being about was about forgiveness. Most of the time I'm writing towards something, completing a book, and I don't know what the book's question is yet. Or I'm usually confused about the question. I usually have a surface idea that I'm following, and once I start putting things together, I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is really about this. And so I realized the big poems begin and end with forgiveness in one of the lines. And the thing that made forgiveness okay for me in the case of my friend's murderers was coming across the quote that the best revenge is complete forgiveness. And I just thought that was really interesting, of like I could let it go because it would also be a revenge, not just a way I would give myself something and something good. So this last poem is called You Said Eden Disappeared. It ends the book, and I've never read it at a reading before. And at this point now, and I'll ask for it again later, please put a question in the comments if you'd like me to answer it. It does have an epigraph by William Carlos Williams that says, but the sea, which no one tends, is also a garden. You said Eden disappeared. Drink the glacier's milk and silt. Our prayers rise wingless and nighted by frost, as the fossil of Uriel burns like alcohol across the mouth of a wound. Forget the dull evangelical vision. The two waters of heaven drank the garden, but it still springs and fruits beneath the fathoms. We caught the snowflake eel with a birdcage, so now you're safe enough to surrender to my hand up your shirt, my tongue on your ear. Eat this, my morning. Our hearts as gold as honey, turning to crystals inside the cachelet. It's fine if you're ribbed with echoes and nets. For too long I waited, an untended bed of starfish. I followed the coven of thunderheads to rumors of Atlantis, wanting the christening of thunder. My love witched the loudest waters from the roots, but now they obey your gravity. I believe in the second chance at the bottom of the waterfall, in the way ice heals itself, in the way a fish accepts the lesson of the hook. Take your mouth off my breast, the world isn't there. So much forgiveness awaits us. The green seas part as the angel approaches. So I don't currently see any comments there in the messages. So hopefully some will be coming in. I can see that there's 30 of you out there, so hello. No need to ask questions if you don't want. But I'll talk a little bit. Let's see, which is the poem I talked the least about? I've already talked about my hedgehogs. I don't think I've ever put a hedgehog in a poem. I will say, I guess, first question, and unfortunately I'm getting these texted, so excuse the beeps in that. I guess I can turn off the beeps. Who was my biggest influence as a poet? That's such a good question, and so hard to decide. So I will say, you know that last poem said something about second chances. My next book's title, which I already know, is called Love Prodigal, and it is about finding out or figuring out how to fall in love again after a pretty rocky divorce. And so, you know, that ability to, it's also about how much the phoenix sucks, but that ability to start over and constantly doing that. But one of the things I had to do was fall back in love with poetry. So I can say that this year I've been rereading books that were really formative for me, that when I started writing really shaped me, and I've been wanting to go back to those. And I've been writing response poems back to the poems I read, you know, when I was, you know, years ago, in my early 20s, writing my first poems that I felt like really good about. And I've been writing sort of response poems to my first book and trying to fall back in love with poetry. If I only got to name one, I would have to go with Bridget Pegeen Kelly, and especially the book Song. That was just so formative for me. Other poets I have read this year or reread have been Jack Gilbert, Linda Gregg, Tracy K. Smith, Robert Hass, Larry Levis. And this is not a complete list. I reread Louise Glick's Wild Iris, Anne Carson, and this is just the people that are occurring to me right now, but I do have a stack of books that even with, you can kind of see back there, even with COVID, I took all of the books, I made a stack of, and brought them home so that I could reread poets that were really meaningful to me and like helped me figure out how to fall in love with poetry. So it became really hard to write for a minute, and so I dove back into trying to fall back in love by going back to those, just like you might in a romantic relationship, doing the things that first made you fall in love with that person, going back to the poems that first made me realize the possibility of poems and what I wanted to do with them myself. So how long have I been working? The next question I have in front of me is, how long have you been working with your writing group and how did you get together? So I'll say I live in the middle of Kansas. It'd be lonely. So part of the way it started was I was kind of mopey that there was no writing group, and then I realized you have to create the community you want to be a part of. And so actually my writing group is a bunch of my former students and some other instructors in the department who also, have a creative writing background or just want to write. A couple times I found people in the community, but it's just, right now we meet on Zoom, but otherwise it's just once a month at my house. We do cold reads so that it's really low stakes, and I have beer and wine, and we hang out and we talk about poems and pop culture and each other's work. And I also really like that we just talk. So like there's no cone of silence for the poet. The poet reads the poem is like, so I just wrote this today, so really I'm open to anything. Or, so I feel like something's wrong with the second half, but I can't put my finger on what. So we can just have a conversation because we've read each other's work, some of us for years. But people drop and people come back. But I think keeping it pretty low stakes for everyone involved and then just inviting people has just worked really well. But yeah, so like sometimes students after they graduate, they don't have a community, and then it's a way to say like, hey, just come hang out and keep writing. But yeah, so that's really kind of nice. So right now we're doing it through Zoom, and I've appreciated that we can still connect and still read each other's work. And it's all BYOB now, but I used to provide some snacks and stuff. But yeah, keeping it low stakes is really good. Do you write? The next question I have is, do you write your poems from the beginning to the end, or from the middle outward? Gosh, I feel like the way I write changes constantly. And yeah, so just as my life has changed. So when I was a new mom, for instance, it was like if I got a quiet hour, sometimes I would have my son's dad watch him, so I could just go sit in a coffee shop and just like push the words out. And those poems tend to be very short and disconnected. They're often more list-like, and just anything that I could do to make it happen. I used to have elaborate rituals with what I would, the pot of coffee I would brew and the way I would sit and the lighting I needed. I can say that these days I like to think a lot longer. I think it's part of being old. I like to think a lot longer, so I have an idea or a title or a thing I'm ruminating about that I'm turning over and over and over before I sit down. But that doesn't mean I know what it's going to say or do once I get a minute to focus on it. And that, I don't know if this is the top down or the inside out, but in revision, the first question is always, have I said anything meaningful yet? Or what is it that I meant to say? And figuring out if it's a bunch of pretty noise or if I have found that thing that was unexpected, if that showed up for me when I sat down to write, which is really important to me that I experience that. Otherwise, it's just nice lines, and who cares, right? It's just pretty without purpose. And I like my pretty to have purpose. And so that's important to me in a poem. So I always call it, the first time out, it's always the zero draft, not the first draft. It's just getting the lines and fragments out. And so maybe that is more of a middle out. And then the shaping comes in more top bottom, I guess, for me. The next question I had, if you had to write an anti-ode, what would it be about? What am I against? What don't I want to celebrate? 2020. But actually, that's, I've also found a lot of things that I really am grateful for about the ways our lives have changed, and things that, getting to spend more time with my son and the traditions that we have and other things that bake a lot of sourdough. I'm that cliche. Those things that I am really appreciative for. But there's probably a deeper answer, but that is just the first thing that occurs to me. If I'm against something, it's just this year. Although, so anti, what I like about that too, and I'm like, no, but we must praise, or I like to think about that. But what I have found really productive in terms of writing prompts too is figuring out which ones make me uncomfortable. Like if I read a list of prompts, I go, which one makes me most uncomfortable, and then I do that. This is also how I go through museums. If I There's too many pieces of art in an art museum, um, especially in big major cities. So I just walk into a room, and whichever one unsettles me most, I go stand in front of that and figure out what it, why, what's that about. And so if I get a writing prompt, and maybe now I have to write an anti-ode, um, is just figuring out what makes me uncomfortable, or I guess it does make me uncomfortable to be against something often. Um, I often try and see things from every perspective, or to embrace lots of things. But so yeah, thinking about what I'm against might be really productive for me, as discomfort often is. Oh my gosh. Okay. Who are you reading? Who I was reading while I was waiting for this call is Katie Pierce's Danger Days, which I blurbed it so I'd already read it, but I was just sitting down to reread it because I always reread it again when I get a copy of anyone that I'm talking about. And I'm so in awe of these poems the second time around, that just, despite recognizing that the world was falling apart, there is praise and there is beauty, and they're beautifully crafted and they're lovely poems. And that's what I was reading today. I try to read a book most days. Last night I read Leila Shetty's chapbook from Bull City Press, because I'd gotten a bundle of chapbooks from them. The day before that, I read Ghost of by Diana Coy Nguyen, and Space Struck by Paige Lewis, which I'm also teaching, and so that I could talk about it. But I do try and read a book a day when I can. Oh, and I guess I kind of am answering this next one. This next one I have is, do you write at a specific time every day, or catch as catch can? What does your writing practice involve? So I will say that for a long time, those rituals that were so important to me, I had to deliberately break them, because I was so attached to the ritual, because I thought that was the only way the magic would arrive, that I lived in my car for about a year, and I would just write on the backs of postcards and then send them to friends. So I couldn't revise, I couldn't do any of that stuff. I later got the books, postcards, and copied down the stuff I thought was still good. But I had to liberate myself from the way I was writing. And so now whatever works, I really embrace what works. And in addition to being interested in discomfort, like I mentioned, I'm going to say again that my writing group is rad, because lots of times I would not make myself a priority. It's only having a group of people to hang out with that not expect me to, or would be disappointed or judge me if I didn't have one, but having people who care, who ask about the next poem, that's kind of what gets me going. As I have a little community, I have, at least 5-6 people who will talk to me about my work and are interested in what I'm going to do. And if I didn't show up for a couple months with anything, would ask what's going on. So it's nice that reminder helps me make myself and my heart and my language a priority. I have 2 more questions. Do you feel that this manuscript emerged naturally from what you were writing, or did you approach it as a new project? Maybe both. I think I kind of write what feels urgent, and when it doesn't feel urgent, sometimes I do struggle to write. And that doesn't mean it has to be pressure, but my mind turning something over, or sort of in an emotional space and needing to write about that, to untangle it. And I think as a new mom, writing just to retain that part of myself, not wanting that part of who I was before I was a mom to vanish, and trying to make sure that my brain could still hold on to some part of who it used to be and how it used to function. But yeah, I wrote lullabies without thinking what they were, and I thought the essays belonged in a book of essays, and I wrote one night stands because of that. But once I get closer, right, writing Dear Eros in response was definitely because I was I had these poems, and so I think a little bit of both. Just I tend to write and make a giant mess, and then sort of put some structure and stuff around it. And then it becomes more, and the project I think also becomes what is this book's question? What haven't I done yet? And approaching it in that way. Okay, the final question, and it's a little bit past 30 minutes, but it's okay. It's the last question. what was the name of the author who wrote about what lullabies are? Federico Garcia Lorca, who is an amazing poet, and most famously known, if you've heard of Duende in poetry circles, this is the person who wrote on Duende, and part of what made Duende, sort of famous in creative circles. But I really love his essay on lullabies. And I mean, he's very focused on the Spanish lullaby, and he talks about how the Spanish are more comfortable with death and all these things, and how the lullaby, the melody must be soothing to put a child to sleep. But then you can say anything you want, and it becomes such a great mode for maternal confession, because really it's a la 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 la, go the fuck to sleep, where you can say whatever, because the child's not processing the language, they're processing the melody. So it becomes this way that mothers can process and work through something, because the child just needs the melody, and the mother needs the chance to get things off her chest. And I just think that's dope. So that's all the questions that I have been sent. So hopefully that wrapped things up. So if you have anything else, you can probably just find me on Facebook, and you could send me a message if there was something burning question that you had that you didn't get to. But thank you for showing up tonight. I'm glad I got to show off my cute little hedgehogs. My winter hedgehogs are cuter, but I'll just have to post a photo at a later time. I also want to say here that I'm so grateful for the Poets in Pajamas coordinators and organizers who do all of this work to make sure we can all share this space together and talk about poems. There's so many forms of labor that just don't get recognized. So I just want to say, Sarah, especially since you've been the one communicating with me, thank you for your patience today and throughout, and your clarity of communication and everything that you do. I hope everybody stays happy, stays writing, and I'll see you somewhere else on the interwebs. Bye.